Hi, Miriam. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Irma. Nice meeting you too.
How do I pronounce your last name?
Toews.
Thames?
Toews.
Hames. Okay.
Toews. Yeah, the W sounds like a V. So like it rhymes with saves.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. I know it's unusual.
Yeah, a little bit unusual. Well, thank you for this interview. I'm so happy to talk to you because I love your novel.
Thank you.
Was so thrilling. It was so thrilling. I would like to know from the beginning, when you don't know how it's gonna end. It's maybe strange that one man is the one who's telling the story of this woman. Then then at the end of the novel, you'll find out why you chose a male character. But at the beginning, it's like a little bit shocking.
Yeah.
It was a big risk, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. I think in retrospect, because so many people have talked about this and asked me about the male narrator of the book in a book called Women Talking, which is ironic. But I think at the time it didn't seem like a risk to me at all. It seemed to me just the thing that I had to do. The sort of natural, authentic thing that I had to do if I was going to structure the book as minutes of a meeting. Then of course the women are illiterate and wouldn't be able to write them down.
Right, yeah.
And only men from that community are educated, and not even very much, but because August, the narrator, had left the community, was forced to leave the community. He was educated and learned how to read and write. So for me, it just made sense. But then afterwards, when people started talking about it, that this was unusual, that there was a male narrator for this book, and what I was also trying to do with the male narrator was to kind of reverse the roles, the sort of stereotypical roles of men and women, particularly in these types of communities, so that August is there to listen and to learn, and to then take what he's learned from the women and to educate, the boys that he teaches. And the women are the ones who are the planners and the philosophers and the ones who take action. So it was a little bit of a, sort of reversal of roles. And also August is a man who's not considered a real man. He's not considered to be a real man within the context of this type of, patriarchal community, fundamentalist community, where the roles for men and women, of course, are so rigid. And so in a sense, the women are taking care of August, really, and he needs them. And in a sense, they've just asked him to be there just to keep him safe, basically. And they've kind of randomly given him this task of taking the notes of the meeting. But in the end, they don't really mean very much to the women at all, because they have far more urgent and important things to do.
Yeah. Yeah, we noticed that. Molotoshna is based on Manitoba, is the original name of the colony, and it's also based in maybe where you were born, where you grew up also.
I didn't grow up in one of these ultra conservative Mennonite colonies, but I grew up in a very conservative Mennonite community. Essentially the first Mennonite community in Canada, with the Mennonites who came from Russia and settled in the prairies in Manitoba. But the rules, so even though on the outside, it would seem that these are very different communities, the rules and the expectations of men and of women, and that the church has of the people are exactly the same.
And was it hard for you to write this story?
Yeah, it was so hard.
And
I mean, of all the books that I've written, I mean, this one just required so much of I needed to hold the pain of these women, the harm that these women had experienced, the violation, and the violence, and hold that, in my heart while I was writing, and in my head, and still and still stay, sort of focused and try to make the women's voices distinct one from the other, because of course they're, it is just a book of women talking almost entirely. And so it was a challenge to keep the voices and the kind of personalities and the characters distinct. And so, yeah, it was. And then to know, while I was writing this book, to know that, this had really, this happened. This is I mean, my book is fiction. It's an imagined response to the attacks, but these attacks happened and they continue to happen. And so with that knowledge, writing the book was, it was challenging.
Challenging, but I guess necessary in this moment, no? Because
I felt
in some parts of outside the communities, the Mennonite communities, we don't know exactly what is going on in there, no?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It was this intention to let people know what is happening in this particular community, but I guess in all the communities in different ways, no? Different
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are specific, Mennonite colonies. They're and they're so, but they're so isolated, and it's that isolation, and that sort of and the hierarchy, the patriarchy of these types of communities that allow these types of crimes to go and to happen with impunity. Really, I mean, the males are entitled, and the women have no voice and no say, and there's no recourse. These are self-policed communities, so there's nowhere for the women to go. They're in the middle of nowhere. They don't speak the language of the country that they're in. Yeah. The language that they do speak is unwritten, and they have nobody. There's nowhere for them to go. They're essentially prisoners in these communities, and so it was. They're trapped. So it was kind of these are extreme circumstances, obviously, but I think that this story is playing out all over the world, and not only in these isolated Mennonite communities, but this particular story of sexual assault, of domestic violence, and male entitlement.
Ona, you called it Ona or Una?
Ona.
Una, it's a great character. I love her so much. She's so strong, and at the same time she's sweet. She cares for the others. She takes care of everybody. Beginning with August, no?
Mm-hmm,
she's the one who motivates August to do this, who invites him and to motivate him. So how do you create this character, this so strong and powerful character of Ona?
Mm-hmm. Of Ona. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I just modeled her after my sister, my late sister, my sister who died in 10 years ago, and she was my older sister and my only sister, and I thought about her when I was creating the character of Ona, and her intelligence, and like you say, her sweetness. In a sense, a kind of guilelessness, a sort of love for everyone, but also, like a genuine love, for everybody, including August, of course, but also the sense of her being separate from the other women, that she's been kind of written off, like just ignored. And dismissed by the elders in the community, for sure, and by most of the community as being, crazy, but we know that she's not crazy. She's simply, sort of taken control of her own life and is making choices for herself, and is actually, it sort of acts as a kind of, I'm not sure what to say, but it's sort of like wise, wise prophet in a sense in the community. I mean, that's too extreme. She's an ordinary woman in many ways, but she's also, somehow, wise and imparts that wisdom on her on the other women in the community and the men as well.
And she's also, I don't know how to say this, cast away, rejected because she's pregnant and
Mhm.
she's single, but
Mhm.
everyone knows why she's pregnant, no?
Yeah, she's been raped,
Mm.
and she's pregnant with because of that, as a result of that. But she's older, and like you say, she's not married. She doesn't want to get married. She's not interested. Nobody's interested in marrying her anyway. And for all of those reasons, the ones that I mentioned earlier, and like you say, the fact that she's pregnant and not married, are reasons that the community has used to like you say, cast her out, reject her.
There is this other character that is like she's always fighting to Una. How do you pronounce it? Marische?
Yeah, I say Marika.
Marika.
Yeah.
Marika is the one who's always fighting to Una, but at the end she came so beaten up by his husband, and she has to understand that they are doing this for themselves and for their sons and daughters, no?
Mm-hmm.
It's a strong character too. Marika is a really strong character too.
Absolutely, and she doesn't want to admit that this is happening. I mean, because what does that leave you with then? What are your options? And she doesn't want to. She's afraid, like they, most of them are, in a sense. I mean, they don't know the outside world. They know that the world that they're in is a violent place and that they're not safe. And neither are their children, but they don't know what the outside world has in store for them. So Marika is her character. Yeah, I mean, she's afraid, and she's resistant to this idea of them organizing and leaving, and yet she also wants it. She wants to get away. She wants to get away from the violence, but she's terrified, and she also knows that in that community, it's the woman's obligation and duty to stay with your husband.
Yeah, it's terrible because there has been a death even. Mina, you said Mina, has been I don't know if she's dead because of his husband. I don't know, but maybe because when they remember Mina, they said even in death she was smiling and like it was normal to be dead by your husband. Like it was something that happens every day over there, no?
Yeah. I mean, the levels, the numbers of incidents and these types of, I mean, these are extreme circumstances. Obviously, these rapes and these attacks. But a lot of people say that they're continuing. But even aside from these particular rapes that occurred in Bolivia, I mean, the domestic violence in these isolated Mennonite colonies, the lack of recourse for the women, the silencing of the women, and basically, the sort of sanctification of these types of acts, by the church. It's a man's right, and considered to be, sanctioned by God, essentially. And so there's nothing for these women to do.
In all of the novel, in the story, I don't know how to say this, but you're getting some philosophical thoughts, some feminist philosophical thoughts in the voice of your characters, and it doesn't feel like very intellectualized. I don't know if I'm making it clear, and you make it sound natural. Even these characters, I mean the one who's reading. Even when these characters can write, can read, you listen to these things, and there are the truth, and there are philosophical feminist truth. How did you manage to do that, to do this thing?
Again, I remembered I had memories of the Mennonite women that I know, my sisters, my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, friends, and and these are women like every other women in some ways. I mean, they're intelligent, they get together, they talk, they're subversive, they fight, they argue, they philosophize, like you say, but there are restrictions. I mean, there are so many barriers. They're in this closed community, and so the way that they talk about these ideas, the ideas of freedom or justice or forgiveness or any type of philosophical ideas, is all within the context of their own experience, in a sense. So they could compare their lives. They could ask themselves, are we animals or are we humans? And they would compare it to make and metaphors from the world that they know, which is mostly natural, animals and nature and the sky and the crops and that sort of thing. But so it sounds as though they're speaking simply and perhaps ignorantly of certain things, but they're not. They're talking about really essential ideas, like I said, of freedom and justice and what it means to be human and what it means to be a woman, and like you say, it is a feminist argument or conversation that they're having, but they would never categorize it as that. They would never describe it as that. They don't think of themselves as feminist. They don't even know that word, or as radical or as revolutionary or anything like that.
They even reject the word revolution.
Absolutely. And again, with Mennonites, I mean, the experience of revolution is, what happened in Russia, where so many of them were slaughtered. So, that's something that they think of themselves as, their mothers and grandmothers and wives, and that's sort of how they, these roles. And, as individuals, that's something that they only come to later.
Yeah, it's like age and natural wisdom. To know all these things and to know how to express them without the words of philosophy or feminism. They know all these things. They have felt them all. They have felt them all their lives. No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrible, this part when one of them, I can't remember which one, says the men use them until their uterus is on the floor of the kitchen. And then they go and look for younger women, no?
Yeah. Well, and that's what's happening, and not in every family, obviously. But again, the numbers of these types of incest and domestic violence and sexual assault, so that, the women, I mean, there's no birth control, there's no access to birth control. They have families of children, 10 or 12 or 15, my own grandmother had 13 children. And, I mean, and this is what your role is as a wife, as a woman in these types of communities, and so again, father, daughter, brother, sister, incest, is a big problem in these communities, again, because they're so isolated, they're self-policed. There's nothing that the women and the children can do, or the men who are violated as well, can do to get help.
I guess this is a love story, because love is the thing that is all the story. Love is why August begins to approach to this woman, to these women, and love is why Una is I don't know, conjuncting them. How do you say, getting them together?
Yeah, joining.
Yeah, gathering them,
uniting.
Yeah, so I read it and I thought, this is so strong and so terrible what happened to them, but this is also a love story. Have you thought of that like this?
Yeah, absolutely. That was absolutely something that I wanted, that kind of thread in the story between Ona and August. They've
Uh-huh.
loved each other in their way. Some might say it's a platonic love, or
Yes.
or a romantic love. I mean, certainly, but it's love, and it's genuine, and they've loved each other since they were children.
Yeah.
And in the community, and Ona cares so much about August, and senses, at the beginning of the book, she senses that August is suffering, that he's despairing, and that in fact he's suicidal. And
Yeah.
and it's her love for him, that makes her say to him, listen, August, just come with us women, just come to the loft with us women, and so you'll be safe with us for the time being, and we'll give you this task, we'll just give you this job. We know that you know how to read and write because you've been away to university and you have a fancy education, and so
Yeah.
essentially, and that comes from Ona's love for August. And of course, August loves Ona with all of his heart and soul. And, you know,
Honest saves his life.
mhm.
At least at that point, she saves his life because
Yeah,
she gives him something to do.
absolutely.
So this is the thing that I was talking about, and maybe I'm just thinking now that August is the example that not every man in the world is bad. Is a bad,
Absolutely.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
the redemption of men,
The
no?
redemption. And yeah, I mean, August represents so many different things. He can represent, in a sense, he can represent all men, and that he's there to listen. He's there to listen to the women now, to learn, to
Yeah,
re-educate the boys, so that they'll
yeah,
understand that women are human beings, that women are equals. And but he's also, like you say, I mean, he's considered a half man. He's considered not a real man by the traditional men in the colony. So there are, and like you say, I mean, the men, this is a story about the abuse and the violence towards girls and women, but men in these communities, in these colonies, suffer as well.
mm,
The expectations that the church and that the elders put on them, and the fact that they've become, I mean, what does that do to your soul to know that are able to inflict this type of violence, or that it's almost sanctioned. So I would say, I mean, a lot of people would disagree with me, but I feel that the men in these communities suffer as well. um
mhm, I guess so. Finally, because we have like 2 minutes, I would like you to talk to me about your experience with Carlos Reigadas, the filmmaker, the Mexican filmmaker. How was it for you to do this role, to play this role?
Yeah, well, it was a really, I mean, it was a very interesting experience. I learned an awful lot about filmmaking, basically, and could see some of we were out there in the desert for, months, and in Chihuahua, and Chihuahua, Chihuahua, and I don't know, yeah, yeah, in spite of it, I never did learn Spanish, but it was a really interesting experience, and it was intense.
Yeah.
The beauty of that part of Mexico, with the desert and the sky and the light, the challenges in filmmaking. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was definitely a learning experience.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you. And after reading your book, look at this, all the marks
Oh
I made.
yeah, all the notes. Well, thank you so much for your interest in the book. Thank you for reading it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I loved it. I loved it, and I think it's necessary to read and to write books like this. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
Adios, Dan.
Adios.
Bye.
I'm gonna play the little clips, so the next one is ready for you. So
Okay.
it's about 1 minute. So here it goes.
Okay.